If you're nervous about coding challenges, don't be. All you need to do is practice and prepare. Coding challenges are a great way to get feedback and assess your skills. We got all the tips for you to help you ace your next coding challenge interview. Hi everybody, it's Samantha and Sidney, and we're back with another episode that you don't want to miss on the Deeper Than Tech podcast, where we talk about how to grow your career in an industry that was not designed with us in mind. Before we head into this topic, make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. What exactly is a coding challenge?
Yeah, so a coding challenge is one of the first steps in the interview processes typically. And what you're doing is that this is to assess whether or not you are able to efficiently and clearly break down and solve a particular problem. It can be used to see if whether or not you can have improvements and what your coding skills can be, what your methods of problem solving can be, as well as just getting a lot more practice into figuring out how to break down problems as you were going along building something.
And this usually happens before the interview process, is that correct?
Yeah, so I've always had like technical screenings where they're coding challenges where you have a set time to try and figure out a problem. Sometimes a person is there, sometimes they're not, but there are different practice ones that are out there, like Leak Code, for example. What else? There's Code Wars. I'm sure that there are plenty of other like websites and facilities that will help with those particular types of challenges, but you can get practice ones where a person is there with you, and they're also used typically as like the first round of interviews for companies.
Yeah, because usually companies have like a 4-hour plus long interview, and that's a lot of engineering time. So they do like a shorter one, maybe for like an hour or so.
Yeah, just to make sure that they're on the right track.
Yeah. So there's also companies that will send you a coding challenge beforehand called a take-home test. Have you done one of those before?
I have. I definitely like those a little bit better just because I like to be able to give myself that time to think. It's messing up in private, I feel like sometimes, because it can be embarrassing when you're like, oh, I'm trying to figure out this problem and I feel like I'm going to freeze when somebody is looking at you and things. But, you know, that is, again, a practice that you need to try and figure out, get in as much reps as you can as you're going along, because there are sometimes that is going to be the only way that people are going to be able to assess like what you can bring to the table in terms of problem solving as a software engineer.
Do you have an example of like one of the last coding challenges that you did?
Yeah, so for the job that I have now, we had a challenge where it was about an hour. It wasn't necessarily timed, but we were in, Code Sandbox, and they had set up a whole environment for me to play in. They asked me to make an emoji reaction scale, so like doing a little bit of React and TypeScript at the same time. So what we did was that I had two people that I was talking to as I was going through the process in my mind of what exactly I needed to do to go forward. And so I think we used some Material UI, we had used some TypeScript and React to make sure that we were able to change the state of the set of like emojis that we were going to get to is along the sliding scale. And so that was a little bit nerve-wracking. I was definitely like nervous because I had never used Code Sandbox before. And now that's funny enough, I use it all the time because it's so convenient. But yeah, I was able to ask questions during the process, which was very nice. And that helped me kind of ground myself into making a decision in where I needed to go next in terms of the code.
That's actually really nice that you had somebody there to kind of help you and guide you. But not all coding challenges have that person sitting across on a screen to help you. So what should somebody do if they have no idea how to start solving this coding challenge?
Yeah, so I think the best way to kind of ground yourself and start is really trying to understand what the input of what you're needing to solve is, like different variables, different values that are going to be going into the actual problem, and then what is going to be the output. So what is the result supposed to look like? What's the data structure supposed to look like? When you're putting in a number, is that supposed to be the output of the Boolean values, true or false? Figuring out like what those two things are can help you start figuring out where exactly you might need to go in terms of figuring out your algorithm. And then Also, from there, making sure that you have a list of specific steps that you might want to take to get to that output. So I might give myself a checklist in like a notes section. So I'll divide up my code into like comments to give myself a checklist to see where I need to go. And then I follow that checklist. And then making sure that I'm able to output to the console as much as possible is really helpful for me to see if whether or not I am on the right track to solve the problem. And then from there, that gives whoever you might be talking to, or if you're not talking to anybody, it gives you that clear sense of direction on what you might be doing wrong, as well as what you might be doing right, because you just never know. And making sure that you're also not like super aware of your time, but just knowing that like you have time, you have to pace yourself. It's all about making sure that you have your code as well as your notes as organized as possible, I think.
Okay, so you recommend like breaking it down to different steps. Like after you've done that, you might have the steps, but it might be still too difficult for you to solve. Is it okay to tell the company that you don't want to move forward with the coding challenge? How do you say you can't do it?
I've never done that myself before. So I understand that there is maybe a need to be honest, making sure that you're able to ask questions when you feel like you're still stuck on something and being able to explain like where you think you might be stuck. And sometimes it can be very nerve-wracking. Being as honest as possible, I think, is going to be the best way to help the interviewer, like help you and then help them from there. But if you feel like that you're not going to be able to do the challenge, that is okay. That is definitely something where I'm sure that people have gone in over their heads a little bit, and making sure that you're being truthful with like how you're feeling about this, being honest. And maybe it means that you can reschedule the interview. You know, anything can happen as long as you're being like honest and truthful about like what exactly you're feeling and what the situation is going forward.
Yeah, I would also agree with that, being honest. So like even if you had like a take-home test and you're like, oh, this is going to take me like 20 hours. I'm sorry, I'm not working for free for 20 hours.
Yeah.
So I might be like, hey, company, is there something else I can do? I don't have the amount of time allotted for this project. It's going to, I'm estimating it at this amount of time, which is like showing that you know how to scope work, and which is also good for the company. So maybe they have another alternative, or maybe that's just not the company for you.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're going to make you work for 20 hours for free. So
yeah, and that's something, again, like you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. And so it's going to be really important to have that evaluation going forward. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like I've definitely turned down take-home interviews and things because I was like, that is not worth my time and you are not paying me for it. So
yeah, time is very valuable here. Is there any other advice that you have for people who are like new to coding challenges?
Yeah, I think that making sure that as long as you are getting those reps, that practice that you feel like you need before you're actually going into a coding challenge with Leak Code, if you are able to with different other resources, what is a daily coding problem is an email list that I'm personally on, that I know that other people are on. They gives you one coding challenge a day to try. Interview Cake, there are plenty of resources to help you kind of get those reps in and practice as much as possible. And as long as you're staying as organized as you can be in your code, like having your notes, having your checklist, having your inputs and outputs, and logging to the console or evaluating out your function, your evaluation as much as possible, I think that's going to help you be a lot less nervous because you're giving yourself that feedback, that output all of the time, seeing what you've done wrong and what maybe you've done right. So pace yourself. It is a lot to think about, but as long as you're giving yourself that chance, giving yourself those reps, I think that it's possible to get through. We all get nervous. We all get nervous with those interviews. I still do myself. So it's good to practice. It's really good to practice.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sidney, for all the great tips on coding challenges. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.